January 30th, 1943, Ilsen 11s in the morning, Berlin. Germany Reich's Marshal Hermann Göring stood at the lectern inside the Reich Broadcasting House, preparing to deliver his anniversary address to the German people. 10 years had passed since the Nazis seized power. The microphones were live, the nation waiting. Then the air raid sirens began to wail. 3 wooden aircraft flying at $25,000 FT above the German capital were about to humiliate the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany. These were not the lumbering metal bombers that German fighters could intercept. These were de Havilland Mosquitoes constructed from plywood and balsa, traveling at speeds exceeding 400 mph. To Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, this moment would crystallize into an obsession that would consume German aviation resources for years to come. The Mosquito represented everything Nazi ideology claimed was impossible. A wooden aircraft built by Atomocracy Germany, considered decadent, outperforming every metal fighter and bomber the Reich possessed. What happened next would trigger the most expensive attempt at technological mimicry in Luftwaffe history, a desperate race to copy what German engineers insisted could not work, a program that would fail spectacularly, destroyed not by enemy action, but by the very industrial weaknesses the Mosquito had been designed to circumvent. The story of Germany's attempt to replicate the wooden wonder would become a case study in how ideology, desperation, and material scarcity can turn innovation into catastrophe. The bombs fell on Berlin at precisely 1100. Göring's speech was cut off mid-transmission. For over an hour, chaos reigned inside the broadcasting station as technicians scrambled to restore the connection. When Göring finally spoke, witnesses described him as boiling with rage and humiliation. His famous boast from September 1939 echoed mockingly in German minds. "No enemy bomber can reach the Ruhr," he had declared. "If one reaches the Ruhr, my name is not Göring. You may call me Maya." Now, enemy bombers had struck Berlin itself in broad daylight on the most important date on the Nazi calendar, and they had done so with wooden airplanes. The Mosquito attack that day involved 6 aircraft total. 3 from 105 Squadron struck first in the morning. 3 more from 139 Squadron followed in the afternoon, timed to disrupt a speech by Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels. 5 aircraft returned safely to base. 1 Mosquito from 139 Squadron, crewed by Squadron Leader Darling, and Flying Officer Wright, was shot down by anti-aircraft fire. Both men died. Their sacrifice demonstrated that even the Mosquito was not invulnerable. Yet the loss rate remained extraordinary. German fighters had been unable to intercept any of the attacking aircraft. By January 1943, Mosquitoes had flown over 600 operational missions against Germany. The loss rate remained below cent, extraordinary by any measure. Compare that to the Royal Air Force's conventional bombers, which suffered loss rates exceeding 5% per mission. Thematics were devastating for German morale. A wooden airplane, which Nazi propaganda claimed represented British desperation and technological inferiority, was proving nearly untouchable. Geoffrey de Havilland had begun sketching the concept in 1938. His vision contradicted every principle of modern aircraft design. As metal construction dominated aviation worldwide, de Havilland proposed building a bomber entirely from wood. No defensive armament, no armor plating, no self-sealing fuel tanks, just speed, altitude, and the structural efficiency of composite wood construction. The British Air Ministry initially rejected the concept as absurd. How could wood compete with metal? How could an unarmed bomber survive? The answers lay in mathematics that German engineers would later struggle to replicate. De Havilland had pioneered wooden aircraft construction with the DH-88 Comet Racer in 1934. 3 Comets entered the London to Melbourne air race. 1-1 covering 11,000 in 71 hours. The Comet's construction used layers of plywood and balsa wood bonded with adhesive Forminga stressed skin Minogue structure. This sandwich construction provided strength equal to metal at half the weight. De Havilland refined the technique with the DH-91 Albatross airliner in 1937. The Albatross carried 22 passengers at speeds of 210 mm/peak, faster than contemporary bombers. When war came in September 1939, de Havilland recognized that aluminum would become scarce. Britain needed aircraft production to scale rapidly. Wood offered the solution. Furniture factories, piano manufacturers, boat builders, all possessed the skills to work with wood. These craftsmen could not build metal aircraft, but they could build wooden ones. On March 1, 1940, the Air Ministry issued specification B-140.50 bomber reconnaissance variants of the DH-98 were ordered. The prototype designation was W-450. On November 25, 1940, Jeffrey de Havilland Jr. took the prototype aloft from Hatfield Aerodrome. The flight lasted 30 minutes. Every expectation was exceeded. The Mosquito prototype, painted in bright yellow, demonstrated handling characteristics pilots described as fighter-like despite its size. The first operational reconnaissance sortie occurred on September 17, 1941, when a photo reconnaissance Mosquito flew over France gathering intelligence. On January 16, 1941, the prototype received a Spitfire in comparative trials. The Mosquito, a twin-engine bomber weighing twice what a Spitfire weighed, flew 20 mph faster, 48 mph at 22,000 ft. German intelligence officers, who later reviewed these figures, assumed they were propaganda fabrications. No twin-engine aircraft carrying bombs could outrun single-engine fighters. Yet the Mosquito did exactly that. The secret lay in the power-to-weight ratio. 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, each producing over 1,500 horsepower, drove the Mosquito's lightweight wooden airframe. The entire aircraft structure weighed approximately 14,300 lb empty, yet a comparable metal bomber would weigh significantly more. The wooden construction provided substantial weight savings while maintaining structural strength, translating directly into speed and altitude performance beyond anything Germany possessed. The construction method was revolutionary. The fuselage comprised 2 halves, each built on massive concrete molds. Workers laid strips of birch plywood inside the molds, then a layer of Ecuadorian balsa wood, then more birch plywood. The layers were bonded with casein adhesive, a milk-based glue. After the adhesive cured, the 2 fuselage halves were joined along the center line. The wings used a similar sandwich construction. Douglas fir and spruce spars provided the structural backbone, with English ash-forming wing ribs and tension strips. Birch plywood and balsa formed the wing skins. Walnut reinforced critical bulkheads. The entire wing was built in one piece, requiring no rivets or fasteners. This construction technique offered advantages German engineers would later fail to appreciate. Wood provided excellent damage resistance. Bullets passed through wood without shattering the structure, unlike aluminum, which cracked and peeled. Wood did not produce radar returns as efficiently as metal, making the Mosquito harder to detect. Wood could be repaired in field conditions using basic tools and materials available anywhere. Most critically, wood eliminated dependence on strategic metals that Germany lacked. By summer 1942, Mosquitoes were operational in multiple roles. Photo reconnaissance variants flew over Germany at 40,000 ft beyond the ceiling of German fighters. Bomber variants struck precise targets with minimal losses. Fighter bomber variants armed with 4 20mm cannons and 4 303 caliber machine guns proved devastatingly effective against German shipping and ground targets. Night fighter variants equipped with airborne intercept radar downed German bombers over England. The versatility shocked German intelligence analysts. A single basic airframe fulfilled roles that required entirely different aircraft designs in the Luftwaffe. The Mosquito could carry a 4,000 LEB bomb load farther than most dedicated bombers. It could fight as a pure fighter despite carrying bombs. It could conduct reconnaissance missions lasting 8 hours. It could launch rockets against armored vehicles. A distinct variants entered service during the war. Production scaled rapidly. De Havilland's factory at Hatfield built the prototypes, then production dispersed to furniture manufacturers across Britain. By 1943, companies that had built dining tables and pianos were assembling complete Mosquito fuselages. The workforce included women, older men beyond military age, and skilled craftsmen who could never have worked with metal aircraft. Nearly 8,000 Mosquitoes were built in Britain, Canada, and Australia by war's end. The operational record built steadily through 1942. Mosquitoes bombed the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo in September, destroying records of resistance members. They struck precision targets across occupied Europe, losing aircraft at rates below 1%. By late 1942, German night fighter crews were reporting something ominous. British aircraft they could not catch were conducting reconnaissance missions across Germany with impunity. Reconnaissance Mosquitoes stripped of all unnecessary equipment and carrying only cameras achieved speeds of 420 miles at altitude. German fighters climbing to intercept found empty sky. The Mosquito pilots could see German fighters launching from bases below and simply accelerated away. By the time German fighters reached operational altitude, the Mosquito was 100 miles distant. For Luftwaffe pilots trained to believe in German technical superiority, the experience produced a dangerous psychological effect. If they could not catch a wooden British bomber, what did that say about German aircraft design? The crisis escalated through early 1943. Mosquitoes began appearing over Berlin regularly, conducting what the British called nuisance raids. Small formations, sometimes just 2 or 3 aircraft, struck at irregular intervals day and night. They disrupted manufacturing, prevented workers from sleeping, forced constant alert status that exhausted defenders. German fighters scrambled repeatedly, burning precious fuel, achieving nothing. Anti-aircraft batteries fired thousands of rounds, hitting nothing. The Mosquito flew too high, too fast, too unpredictably to intercept with 1943 technology. Hermann Göring obsessed over the situation. At conferences with aviation ministry officials, he demanded explanations. How could the British build wooden aircraft superior to German metal designs? The answers he received contradicted Nazi ideology at every level. British engineers were not inferior. British industrial organization was not chaotic. British material science was not behind German standards. The Mosquito existed because Britain had solved problems Germany had not even recognized. On March 18, 1943, Göring summoned Germany's aviation industry leaders to Carenhal, his vast hunting estate in the shore-side forest. For 6 hours he berated them. A stenographer recorded every word, creating a historical document that revealed the depth of German frustration. Göring focused particular fury on the Mosquito's wooden construction. "I go mad when I look at the Mosquitoes," he raged. "I am green and yellow with envy. The Englishman, who has more aluminum than we do, is building a wooden machine, and with a speed which now increases again." Professor Willy Messed sat silently during much of Göring's tirade. His company produced the Bf-109 fighter and the Bf-110 heavy fighter. Both were all metal designs. Neither could catch a Mosquito at altitude. Göring turned to Messmet directly. "You're supposed to be the greatest aircraft designer in Germany," he said with barely disguised sarcasm. "Tell me why you cannot build a wooden aircraft capable of the performance we demanded." Messmet had no good answer. German aviation had committed entirely to metal construction. The industrial infrastructure, the engineering expertise, the manufacturing processes, all optimized for aluminum airframes. Converting to wood construction would require retraining workers, retooling factories, developing new adhesives, sourcing different materials. Germany lacked access to high-quality balsa wood from Ecuador. German furniture industry had different skills than British piano makers. The adhesive technology that made British wooden aircraft possible was not available in Germany. But Göring wanted a German Mosquito, and what Göring wanted the aviation industry had to provide. Erhard Milch, Reich Minister of Aviation, had already decided that Fallwolf would lead the effort. Kurt Tank, chief designer at Fowler-Wolf, had begun preliminary work on a wooden night fighter in late 1942. The project would receive top priority, unlimited resources, and a name deliberately chosen to invoke the British original. The Germans would call it the Mosquito. The Fowler-Wolf TAR 154 Mosquito represented German engineering attempting to replicate British empirical success. Tank proposed an aircraft superficially similar to the Mosquito. Twin engines, wooden construction, 2 crew members, heavy armament for night fighting. These specifications called for speeds of 440 mph, a ceiling of 37,000 ft, and a range of 1,000 mph. If achieved, these numbers would match or exceed the Mosquito's performance. The design progressed rapidly through late 1942 and early 1943. Tank initially selected the Junkers Jumo 2111 engine for early prototypes, a liquid-cooled inline engine producing 300 to 500 horsepower depending on variant. However, the intended production engine was the more powerful Junkers Jumo 213 capable of 1,750 horsepower. The airframe would use wooden construction with strategic metal reinforcements. A special phenolic resin adhesive called TGO film, manufactured by Gold-Schmidt Company in Wuppertal, would bond the wooden components. The cockpit would be pressurized, a feature the Mosquito lacked. Armament would include 2 30 Mk108 cannons and 2 20 Mk151 cannons. Firepower exceeding any British night fighter. On July 1, 1943, the first prototype took flight from Langenhagen Airfield. The aircraft designated V1 bore the identification code TE+FE. Test pilot Hans Sander likely flew this initial flight, though some sources credit Kurt Tank himself. The flight lasted 40 minutes and showed promise. Tank reported excellent handling and impressive speed in subsequent test flights. Follow-on prototypes confirmed the promise. During competitive trials at Rechen-Lairs Airfield, the TAR 154 outflew both the Heinkel He-2-19 and Junkers Ju 38. The lightly loaded prototypes without full armament and radar equipment reached nearly 440 milliparin level flight. This impressive figure exceeded German night fighter performance, though production aircraft with operational equipment would prove considerably slower. German aviation officials celebrated, finally an answer to the British Mosquito. Production plans called for 37 aircraft by May 1944, scaling to 250 per month by November. Factories in Posen prepared for mass production. The Luftwaffe designated units to receive the new night fighter. Everything seemed on track. Then reality intervened. The Jumo 213 engines never arrived in required quantities. Junkers factories struggled with production problems. Engines allocated to the TAR 154 were diverted to other programs. By spring 1944, only a handful of prototypes existed, all fitted with lower-powered Jumo 211 engines that reduced performance below specifications. The airframe itself revealed problems. The wooden wing structure proved heavier than calculated. Additional strengthening was required, adding weight that degraded speed and climb rate. The landing gear designed for the aircraft's original estimated weight proved inadequate for the actual weight and required reinforcement. More ominously, internal politics threatened the program. Ernst Hanke lobbied relentlessly for his He-219 night fighter. Luftwaffe commanders, particularly the night fighter units, preferred the He-219's superior radar and crew visibility. Hard Milch fought to keep the TAR-154 alive, but opposition grew. Some officials questioned whether Germany needed another night fighter at all. Resources might be better spent on jet fighters like the Mi-262 Kurt. Tank found himself defending his design against critics within his own government. Then on May 29, 1940, 3 Royal Air Force bombers struck. The targets included industrial facilities in the Posen province where TAR-154 production was beginning. More critically, bombers attacked Wuppertal. The town held Goldmid Company's factory, the only factory in Germany producing TGO film adhesive. Over 700 aircraft participated in the devastating night raid on Wuppertal, creating a firestorm that killed thousands. Among the destroyed facilities was the TGO film production plant. TGO film production ceased immediately. The immediate response was to source alternative adhesives. Dynamit Nobel AG Leverkusen produced a phenolic resin adhesive used in other applications. This substitute was delivered to Fowler-Wolf with assurances it would work adequately. What followed was catastrophic. On June 28, 1944, a TAR-154 broke apart during a test flight. Investigation revealed the substitute adhesive had chemically reacted with the wooden structure, corroding the wood fibers and destroying structural integrity. In July 1944, 2 more TAR-154A1 aircraft completed using the Dynamit Nobel adhesive took off for acceptance testing. 1 aircraft crashed when its wings disintegrated in flight. 3 more crashes followed. Each one revealed the same problem. Their replacement adhesive was not just weaker than TGO film, it was actively destructive. Kurt Tank immediately grounded all TAR-154 aircraft and halted production. Engineers frantically searched for alternatives. None existed within Germany. TGO film required specific chemical processes and materials that could not be replicated quickly. The factory that produced it was gone. Destroyed by the same British bombers, the TAR-154 was designed to intercept. On August 14, 1944, Tank formally ceased all production of the TAR-154. On September 9, 1944, the Reich Aviation Ministry canceled the entire program. Approximately 50 production aircraft had been completed, most using the inadequate substitute adhesive. A few pre-production aircraft remained serviceable. Several were assigned to night fighter units for evaluation. Combat records suggest they achieved limited success against British bombers, but were outmatched when encountering Mosquitoes. The irony was complete. Germany's attempt to copy the Mosquito failed because British bombers destroyed the Theon factory producing the adhesive that held the German copy together. 1 year before the TAR-154 entered production, the Wooden Wonder had destroyed the very industrial capacity needed to replicate it. But the failure went deeper than one bombing raid. The TAR-154 disaster revealed fundamental weaknesses in German aviation that would have doomed the project even without the Wuppertal raid. Germany lacked access to the high-quality materials the Mosquito used. Ecuadorian balsa, Canadian spruce, British birch. These were empire resources Germany could not obtain. German wood substitutes were heavier and less consistent. British adhesive technology developed through years of experience building wooden racing aircraft and airliners exceeded German capabilities. The case and glue used in British Mosquitoes proved reliable in all climates and conditions. German adhesives developed for furniture and construction could not withstand thestraces of combat aircraft. More fundamentally, Germany lacked the industrial organization to mass-reduce wooden aircraft. British furniture factories converted smoothly to mosquito production because the skills transferred directly. German furniture industry had different construction methods. Retraining workers, adapting factories, developing quality control procedures all took time Germany did not have. The mosquito had been in production since 1941. By the time Germany attempted to copy it in 1943, the British had solved hundreds of manufacturing problems and trained thousands of workers. Germany tried to replicate in months what Britain had developed over years. The strategic situation made matters worse. By 1944, Germany faced resource shortages across all industries. Aluminum remained scarce, but so did wood. Quality lumber was diverted to war infrastructure, fortifications, mine timbers. Chemical plants that might have produced adhesives focused on explosives and synthetic fuels. Skilled workers who might have built wooden aircraft were conscripted into the Wehrmacht, where working in higher priority programs. The Faller Wolfar 154 competed for resources with jet fighter programs, existing piston aircraft production, and desperate attempts to replace losses on multiple fronts. Personnel quality declined as the war continued. Kurt Tank was a brilliant designer, but he lacked Geoffrey de Havilland's decades of wooden aircraft experience. The engineers working on the TAR-154 were learning as they designed, making mistakes that British designers had already encountered and solved. Test pilots reported handling problems that suggested fundamental aerodynamics issues. Quality control at factories degraded as experienced workers were replaced by forced labor and hastily trained recruits. Aircraft emerged from factories with construction floors that should have been caught during production. The few TAR-54 aircraft that reached operational units performed poorly compared to expectations. The Jumo 211 engines provided insufficient power. Top speed rarely exceeded 400 mph, far below the Mosquito's performance. Climb rate was inadequate for rapid intercept. The wooden construction proved difficult to maintain in field conditions. Moisture damaged adhesive bonds. Temperature changes caused warping. Repairs required specialized skills and materials that forward units lacked. Most operational TAR-15-4s were grounded within weeks due to maintenance problems. Combat encounters with actual mosquitoes proved humiliating. On March 16, 1945, a Junkers engineering report documented engagements between TAR-1549 fighters and British mosquitoes over northern Germany. In every encounter, the Mosquito outran the German aircraft. The TAR-154 could not catch what it was designed to destroy. Its wooden construction, which should have provided performance advantages, instead added weight and maintenance burdens without delivering the speed necessary to compete. By April 1945, the remaining TR-154 aircraft were withdrawn from combat operations. Some were used as training aircraft for jet pilot conversion. A few were cannibalized foreparts. Most were simply abandoned at airfields as Allied forces advanced. The total production run, including prototypes, numbered perhaps 70 aircraft. Compare that to nearly 8,000 Mosquitoes built by the Allies. The program consumed resources, engineering talent, and factory capacity that Germany desperately needed elsewhere. The return was effectively zero. The contrast between the Mosquito and the TAR-154 illustrated broader patterns in wartime technological competition. The Mosquito succeeded because it was designed around available resources and industrial capabilities. Geoffrey de Havilland understood that Britain had skilled woodworkers, reliable adhesives, and access to quality materials. He designed an aircraft that exploited those advantages. The manufacturing process was distributed across dozens of small facilities, making production resilient to bombing. The design was deliberately simple, using province instruction methods scaled up from smaller aircraft. The TAR-154 failed because it attempted to copy a design without understanding the industrial ecosystem that made it possible. German engineers saw the Mosquito's performance, assumed they could replicate it by copying the visible features. They missed the decades of experience, the industrial infrastructure, the material science, the trained workforce. They assumed wooden construction was simple because wood was a traditional material. They discovered too late that modern wooden aircraft required sophisticated engineering, specialized materials, and trained craftsmen as skilled as any metal worker. The strategic blunder was assuming that copying an enemy's successful design would automatically produce similar results. This approach ignored the context in which the Mosquito was developed. It ignored the British aviation industry's strengths and Germany's weaknesses. Most critically, it diverted resources from areas where German engineering actually held advantages. The Messed Mi-262 jet fighter represented genuinely advanced technology where Germany led the world. Resources spent on the TAR-154 might have produced hundreds more jets. Hermann Göring's envy of the Mosquito led directly to one of the Luftwaffe's most expensive failures. His March 1943 tirade at Karen Hall revealed not just frustration with British success, but a fundamental misunderstanding of why that success occurred. Göring believed that superior German engineering should automatically overcome any British advantage. He could not accept that British empirical incremental development might produce better results than German theoretical approach. He demanded a German Mosquito without understanding what made the British Mosquito work. The broader lesson extended beyond aircraft design. Nazi ideology consistently underestimated enemies it considered racially or culturally inferior. The Mosquito demonstrated that British engineering was not just competitive with German engineering, but in specific areas superior. The aircraft's success came from practical problem solving, not theoretical elegance. It came from leveraging industrial strengths, not forcing industrial capabilities into ideological patterns. It came from distributed production using available skills, not centralized manufacturing requiring specialized resources. Germany's failure to copy the Mosquito mirrored its failure to match Allied industrial production across all categories. By 1944, Allied factories outproduced German factories in every measurable category. Aircraft, tanks, ships, trucks, artillery, ammunition, all showed massive Allied advantages. Germany responded by trying to match quality against quantity, developing technically sophisticated weapons that required resources Germany lacked. Their result was smaller numbers of marginally better equipment. Facing overwhelming numbers of good enough equipment, the wooden wonder remained beyond German reach until war's end. Mosquitoes continued striking targets across Germany through April 1945. They conducted the final Royal Air Force bombing raid of the European War, striking Kiel on May 2, 1945. Throughout the war, Mosquito loss rates remained below 2%, the lowest of any Allied bomber type. The aircraft's versatility proved so valuable that production continued after the war ended. The last Mosquito left the factory in November 1950, 5 years after German surrender. Post-war analysis revealed just how thoroughly the Mosquito had dominated its German counterparts. In photo reconnaissance, no German aircraft could match its altitude, speed, or range. In night fighting, Mosquito night fighters achieved more kills against German aircraft than the TAR-154 achieved against British aircraft. In precision bombing, Mosquito bomber variants struck more targets with higher accuracy than any comparable German type. In every role where direct comparison was possible, the wooden wonder outperformed metal German designs. The industrial statistics told their own story. Britain produced 7,181 Mosquitoes during the war. Germany produced approximately 70 T-154 Mosquitoes. British Mosquito production employed distributed facilities requiring only woodworking skills. German. TAR-154 production concentrated in vulnerable factories requiring specialized adhesives. Unavailable after May 1944. British. Mosquito maintenance required basic tools and commonly available materials. German TAR-54 maintenance required specialized skills and materials increasingly scarce as the war continued. The human cost of the mosquito's success appeared in German casualty statistics. Mosquito bombers disrupted German industrial production, destroying factories, killing workers, forcing population dispersal. Mosquito night fighters destroyed German bombers, attacking Britain, saving British civilian lives. Mosquito reconnaissance provided targeting intelligence that made Allied bombing more effective. Every successful mosquito mission represented German resources destroyed, German casualties inflicted, German plans disrupted. The aircraft's low loss rate meant experienced crews survived to fly hundreds of missions, accumulating expertise that made them increasingly effective. For the crews who flew Mosquitoes, the aircraft became legendary. Pilots praised its handling, its speed, its ability to bring them home despite damage. Navigators valued the heated cockpit, the visibility, the range that allowed deep penetration missions. Ground crews appreciated the simplicity of maintenance, the ease of repair, the reliability that kept aircraft operational. Post-war surveys found Mosquito crews expressed higher satisfaction with their aircraft than any other bomber type. They trusted the wooden wonder with their lives, and it consistently delivered. The legacy extended beyond World War II. The Mosquito influenced post-war aircraft design in multiple ways. Its use of composite construction preaged modern carbon fiber aircraft. Its multi-role versatility established patterns that continue in modern combat aircraft. Its emphasis on speed and altitude over defensive armament influenced jet bomber design. The lessons learned building wooden aircraft transferred to modern composite materials that share many of wood's advantages. The distributed production model demonstrated resilience that modern military planners still study. For Germany, the TAR-154 failure became a case study taught in post-war engineering programs. Students learned how technological ambition without industrial capacity produces failure. They studied the importance of matching designs to available resources. They examined how strategic decisions made in desperation often waste more resources than they save. The TAR-154 appears in military history courses as an example of how copying enemy success without understanding underlying factors guarantees failure. The story of Hermann Göring's envy and Germany's failed attempt to copy the Mosquito illustrates a fundamental truth about wartime innovation. Technology alone does not determine outcomes. Industrial capacity, resource availability, workforce skills, organizational structure, all matter as much as engineering excellence. The Mosquito succeeded not because it was theoretically perfect, but because it was practically achievable within British capabilities. The TAR-154 failed, not because German engineers were incompetent, but because they attempted to replicate something their industrial system could not support. The wooden wonder demonstrated that sometimes the best solution is the one that works with what you have, not the one that requires what you lack. Geoffrey de Havilland understood this principle. He designed an aircraft using resources Britain possessed, optimized for production Britain could achieve, suited to missions Britain needed. Hermann Göring never understood this principle. He demanded an aircraft matching British performance without considering whether Germany possessed the industrial ecosystem to produce it. The result was predictable. British Mosquitoes flew over 15,000 operational sorties. German Mosquitoes barely flew at all. By war's end, the Mosquito had become one of the most successful aircraft designs in history. 7,781 built, 42 variants developed, service in air forces of 17 nations, operations on every continent where combat occurred. The aircraft achieved this success through pragmatic engineering, not theoretical perfection, through distributed production, not concentrated manufacturing, through leveraging existing skills, not requiring new capabilities. The wooden wonder worked because everything about its design, production and operation aligned with what was actually possible. The TAR-54, by contrast, existed mostly as a series of prototypes and a pile of incomplete airframes. It represented resources wasted, opportunities missed, and the consequences of strategic decisions made from envy rather than analysis. Hermann Göring saw the Mosquito and turned green and yellow with envy. That envy drove Germany to attempt copying what it could not produce. The failure was inevitable from the moment Göring demanded a German Mosquito without first asking whether Germany could actually build one. In the end, the story was not about wood versus metal or British engineering versus German engineering. It was about understanding your strengths and designing solutions that leverage them. It was about recognizing that what works for your enemy might not work for you. It was about accepting that sometimes the other side has genuinely superior solutions and trying to copy them without the underlying capabilities guarantees failure. The Mosquito taught these lessons. The TAR-154 confirmed them, and Hermann Göring learned them too late to matter.